The smile on my mother's face when Sierra said it, that's the image burned into my mind. I'm just in it for the good genes, she laughed, right there at our rehearsal dinner. Pastor Wade froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. In that second, something inside me didn't break, it just melted. It's funny, how you can rewrite history in your own head to make it make sense. For 2 years, I wasn't just in a relationship with Sierra, I was her full-time apologist. My name's Owen, I'm a physical therapist. It's a good job. I help people, I see them get better, I make a decent living. It's tangible. Sierra was in public relations. Her job was to manage perceptions, to create a narrative. I guess she never really clocked out. When we met, I was floored. She was this whirlwind of sharp wit, expensive perfume, and an energy that just sucked all the air out of a room and made it hers. She was beautiful and she knew it, and her humor, man, at first I thought it was just part of her confidence. This edgy, New York-style banter. I thought it was cool, a sign that she was smart and unafraid. I mistook arrogance for strength. We'd be at a dinner with her clients, these people in slick suits who talked about portfolios and market shares, and someone would ask what I do. I'd say, I'm a physical therapist, and I'd feel a quiet pride in it. But before I could say another word, Sierra would jump in, draping an arm around my shoulder. "Oh, Owen is an absolute saint," she'd say with a dazzling smile. "He spends his days helping the elderly with their hip replacements. It's just so grounding, isn't it?" And everyone would chuckle, and I'd just smile along. But you see what she did there, right? In one sentence, she'd framed my entire career as a quaint, unserious little hobby. Not a profession built on science and empathy, but a charity case. Grounding, for her, as if my entire life's work was just an accessory to her high-flying lifestyle, something to make her seem more well-rounded. Every time I'd feel this little pinprick right in my gut, but I'd tell myself, she's just trying to brag about you in her own weird way. She's proud. I was an idiot. I was so desperate to avoid a fight, to keep the peace, that I'd accept any explanation, no matter how flimsy. It was the same with my friends. My best friend Dave runs a successful auto body shop. He's the most honest, hardworking guy I know. Sierra met him once at a barbecue. She was polite, of course. She was always perfectly, icily polite. Later that night, she was scrolling through her phone in bed and said, without looking up, "Dave is sweet, very down to earth." There was that tone again. The one that sounded like a compliment but felt like a dismissal. Like she was a biologist observing a fascinating but ultimately simple creature in its natural habitat. I just mumbled, "Yeah, he's a good guy." "I know, honey," she said, finally looking at me. "I just think we should be intentional about who we spend our time with. It's all about building a brand, our brand." Our brand? I didn't have a brand, I had a life, but I didn't say that. I just rolled over and pretended to be asleep. Because arguing with Sierra was like wrestling with smoke. She'd twist my words, make me feel like I was being overly sensitive, and by the end of it, I'd be the one apologizing. It was just easier to swallow it, to let the little resentments pile up one by one. Each one was a small compromise, a tiny piece of myself I chipped away to keep the machinery of our relationship running smoothly. I told myself this was what love was, bending, compromising. I just didn't realize I was the only one doing it and that I was about to bend until I snapped. It wasn't enough to just polish me in private. The real performance, I learned, required an audience. As the wedding plans ramped up, so did Sierra's need to present me not as the man she loved, but as the project she had successfully acquired and upgraded. Our life became a stage, and I was her supporting actor, often with unread lines. We were at a fundraiser for a modern art museum she was desperate to get on the junior board of. It was a sea of black dresses and champagne flutes. I felt like I was wearing a costume. One of her friends, a woman with a name like Blythe or Hadley, asked about my family. Before I could give my standard, honest answer, that my dad was a beloved high school history teacher who passed away a few years ago and my mom was a retired librarian, Sierra jumped in. "Owen's family is fascinating," she announced, her voice carrying just enough to draw in the people nearby. His father had this incredible, almost secret collection of historical artifacts. He was so brilliant with his investments. Owen is just pathologically modest about it all. I just stood there smiling, my drink suddenly feeling very heavy in my hand. Pathologically modest, my dad's prize investment was a complete set of 1970s National Geographic magazines that he was immensely proud of. His artifacts were a few rusty colonial-era nails he'd found with a metal detector on a family vacation. The man was brilliant, yes, but at making history come alive for 16-year-olds, not at playing the stock market. I felt a hot flush of shame, not for my dad, but for the lie. I was standing on his memory and letting her use it as a stepping stool, but what could I do? Yell, "That's a lie," in the middle of this sterile, white-walled gallery, expose my fiancée as a fraud in front of the people she was trying to impress. So I just nodded, a tight, stupid little nod. I became a co-signer on her fiction. The jabs got more personal, disguised as loving teases. One Saturday, we were meeting another couple for brunch. I put on a favorite shirt of mine, a soft, worn-in denim work shirt. It was comfortable, it fit well, it felt like me. We walked into the restaurant, and as we greeted her friends, Sierra ran a hand down my arm and said, loud enough for them to hear, "Don't you just love Owen's rugged, salt-of-the-earth style? It's so authentic, it reminds me of those old pictures of factory workers from the Great Depression." She smiled at her friends. "I think it's important he stays connected to his roots, don't you?" Her friends laughed politely, and I felt myself shrink inside my own clothes. My favorite shirt suddenly felt like a costume for a part I didn't want to play, the working-class pet. I wanted to rip it off. Instead, I forced a laugh and said something lame like, "Yeah, keeping it real." My mom was the only one who saw through it. She lived a few states away, so she only got the curated version of Sierra over the phone and during brief holiday visits. But mothers have a kind of emotional X-ray vision. About a month before the wedding, she called me. "Everything's okay, Owen?" she asked. Her voice was gentle. "Yeah, Mom, just busy with the final wedding details. You know how it is." There was a pause. "I know, it's just Sierra seems very focused on putting on a good show." "That's her job, I suppose, but are you happy? I mean really, truly happy, sweetheart?" The question hung in the air, a lifeline I was too afraid to grab. Admitting I wasn't would mean admitting the last 2 years were a mistake. It would mean a colossal, messy, public failure. It was easier to lie. "Of course I am, Mom," I said, and my own voice sounded hollow to me. "She's amazing, you'll see at the wedding. Everything's perfect." It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. And I told it to the one person in the world I never wanted to lie to. I was protecting a woman who saw my family as a punchline, and in doing so, I was pushing away the person who saw me as her son. I hung up the phone and felt sick. I was no longer just boiling in her water, I was actively helping her turn up the heat. The rehearsal dinner wasn't some grand affair. It was supposed to be the calm before the storm, the intimate moment. We were in the small fellowship hall attached to the church, a room with beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the lingering scent of coffee and old hymnals. It was just our immediate families, my mom, Sierra's parents, and her sister, and Pastor Wade. It was supposed to be sacred. My mom was glowing. She'd driven 8 hours to be there, arriving with a car full of homemade cookies and a framed photo of my dad to place on a memorial table. She loved Sierra, or rather, she loved the idea of me being happy. She saw the bright smile, the expensive ring, the fancy wedding plans, and she chose to believe it was all real. She kept patting my arm, her eyes a little misty. For her, this was it, her only son, starting his life. Sierra's parents, Richard and Alina, were exactly what you'd expect. Polite, distant, and impeccably dressed. They spoke about their daughter's accomplishments as if they were reading from a corporate press release. Her sister, Chloe, just scrolled silently on her phone, radiating an aura of profound boredom. The whole dynamic was stiff, a stark contrast to the easy warmth my mom brought into the room. We were sitting around a long, fold-out table, picking at a catered meal of dry chicken and overcooked green beans. Pastor Wade was trying his best to bridge the gap, asking us about our honeymoon plans and telling a gentle, self-deprecating story about his own wedding. My mom, in her earnest Midwestern way, was trying to connect. She turned to Sierra, her expression open and full of a terrifyingly genuine affection. "Sierra," she said, her voice soft. I know we haven't had a lot of time to get to know each other, but I see how happy you make Owen, and as a mother, that's all you can ever ask for. To know your child is loved and cared for." She reached across the table and put her hand over Sierra's. "So, thank you, I know he's in good hands. I can finally rest easy." It was so pure, so heartfelt, a mother's blessing offered with total vulnerability, and Sierra soaked it in. She looked at my mom's hand on hers, then she looked around the table, a performer checking her audience. She saw my mom, the symbol of simple, unconditional love. She saw Pastor Wade, the symbol of moral authority, and she saw an opportunity. An opportunity to perform her signature move, the charming, witty takedown that established her as the clever, dominant one in the room. She let out a short, theatrical laugh. She squeezed my mom's hand back, a gesture that looked warm but felt like a trap closing. "Oh, Carol, don't you worry for a second," Sierra said, her voice bright and brittle. She leaned in as if sharing a delightful secret. "I'm just in it for the good genes, got to ensure the quality of the next generation, you know," she winked. Then she gestured her wine glass towards me. "As for him," she added with a dismissive wave, "he doesn't have much else going for him, does he?" Silence. It wasn't a loud silence. It was a thick, heavy, suffocating silence. Pastor Wade's folksy smile froze and then just evaporated off his face. Sierra's own father cleared his throat and suddenly became intensely interested in the pattern on his plate. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my mom. I saw the light in her eyes flicker and die. I saw the genuine warmth on her face curdle into a pained, confused mask. I saw her try to pull her hand back, but Sierra was still holding it, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips. And in that one horrifying second, I saw my mother not as my strong, capable mom, but as Sierra saw her. As a simple, naive prop in her little show. The joke wasn't just on me, it was on my mother's love, it was on my father's memory, it was on the very idea of family and decency. Every excuse I had ever made for her, every time I had told myself she didn't mean it, every conflict I had swallowed to keep the peace. It all came rushing back, not as individual memories, but as a single, massive wave of shame and rage. The water I'd been slowly boiling in for 2 years had just flashed to steam, and the man who had been so afraid of making a scene was about to burn the whole damn theater down. The rage wasn't hot and loud like a forest fire. It was cold and silent like the vacuum of space. It sucked all the air, all the sound, all the life out of me and replaced it with a terrible, crystalline clarity. I didn't slam my hand on the table. I didn't shout. I carefully placed my fork and knife down on my plate, the clink of metal on ceramic sounding like a gunshot in the dead quiet. Sierra was still smiling, waiting for the laughter that always followed her jokes. When it didn't come, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She looked at me, expecting me to play my part, to give a weak chuckle and smooth things over. I looked past her. I looked right at my mother. I saw the tremor in her lower lip as she tried to compose herself, the sheen of unshed tears in her eyes. She was trying to be strong for me. After being so deeply insulted, she was still trying to protect me from the fallout. That was it. That was the final push. I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound on the linoleum floor making everyone flinch. I stood up. My voice, when it came out, didn't sound like my own. It was flat, devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of something that had already ended. The wedding is off. The words just hung there, 4 simple words that detonated the entire reality we had constructed. Sierra's face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, then annoyance, then a flash of panic. "Owen, what are you talking about?" she said, forcing a laugh. "It was a joke." "God, can't anyone take a joke anymore?" "No," I said, my eyes still locked on her, and for the first time, I think, she saw me, not the pliable, conflict-avoidant boyfriend, but a complete stranger. "It wasn't a joke. A joke is funny. That was contempt. That was you showing my mother on the night before I was supposed to marry you that you have nothing but contempt for me, for her, and for my entire family." "You are being so dramatic," she hissed, her voice low and furious now that her audience was turning on her. "You're embarrassing me in front of my parents and the pastor." "Embarrassing you?" The first flicker of heat entered my voice. You sat there and held my mother's hand while you insinuated that the only value I have is my DNA, that I'm just breeding stock for your brand. You did that. You humiliated the one person in this world who came here with nothing but love in her heart for you. I turned to her parents. Richard, Alina, I'm sorry you had to witness this. But this is who your daughter is. This is what she does. They just stared, mouths agape. Then I looked at Pastor Wade. I apologize, Pastor. There will be no wedding tomorrow. I walked around the table to where my mom was sitting, still frozen. I gently took her hand, the one Sierra had held hostage, and squeezed it. It was ice cold. Mom, I said softly, my voice finally breaking with an emotion I couldn't name. It was rage and love and a profound, bottomless sorrow all mixed together. We're leaving. Sierra shot up from her chair. Owen, don't you dare walk out on me. We can fix this. Don't throw this all away over one stupid comment. I didn't even turn around. I just started walking towards the door, holding my mom's hand, leading her away from the wreckage. As I pulled the door open, I said over my shoulder, it wasn't one comment, Sierra. It was just the last one. And then we were out in the cool night air of the church parking lot, leaving her standing alone in the center of her shattered stage. I don't remember the drive back to my apartment. I know my mom was in the passenger seat, but we didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward, it was necessary. It was like the heavy, weighted blanket they put on you after a major surgery. The car was filled with the things she'd brought for the wedding, a garment bag with her dress, a box of the homemade cookies, the framed photo of my dad lying face down on the back seat. Reminders of a future that had evaporated just an hour ago. When we got to my place, the apartment I was supposed to share with Sierra, she didn't ask questions. She just went to the kitchen, found a glass, and filled it with water from the tap. She handed it to me. Her hand was steady now. She just looked at me and nodded, a silent, I'm here. It was everything I needed. She went to the guest room, the room that was still full of boxes from my old place, and quietly shut the door. I was alone. My phone started buzzing on the counter, a call from Sierra. I watched it vibrate, the screen lighting up with the professionally shot engagement photo we'd taken. We looked so happy. It was a lie. I pressed the power button and held it down until the screen went black. I stood in the middle of the living room. It was a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The wedding invitations were in a neat stack on the coffee table, waiting to be mailed. A new, ridiculously expensive espresso machine she'd insisted on was still in its box by the kitchen. Our framed photos were on the walls. In every single one I was smiling, but my eyes looked tired. I saw it now. I looked exhausted. The anger was gone. It had burned itself out on the drive home, leaving behind a thick gray ash. I expected to feel relief. I expected to feel that weight off my shoulders moment people talk about. A rush of freedom, but it didn't come. Instead, what washed over me was a profound, terrifying emptiness. My entire life for the past 2 years had been oriented around her. My schedule, my social circle, my future plans, even my damn wardrobe. It was all calibrated to the gravitational pull of Sierra. Now that center of gravity was gone, and I was just floating, adrift in a silent apartment that felt like a stranger's house. I sank onto the couch. The fury had been an engine, a powerful fuel that got me out of that church hall. But now the engine is off, and there was just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a hurricane has passed, where the sky is clear, but the landscape is flattened and unrecognizable. I was free, but free from what, and free to do what? I looked around the room at the half-packed boxes and the symbols of a shared future. I wasn't mourning the loss of Sierra. I was mourning the loss of the man I was before I met her. The guy who liked his denim shirt, who was proud of his job, who didn't have to translate his life for someone else's approval. Where did he go? I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, just listening to the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of traffic on the street below. The rage was gone. The hurt was a dull, distant ache. All that was left was this vast, hollow quiet. It was peace, I guess, but it felt an awful lot like nothing at all.